Hello, everyone. My name is Don Paulmeyer, and I want to welcome you to this first episode of the Euphomisms podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have Master Gunnery Sergeant Lucas Spiros, retired Principal Euphonium of the President's Own United States Marine Band. Luke, thank you for joining us today on this maiden voyage of our podcast. First, I'd just like you to give us just a quick overview of who you are, what you've done, and then we'll delve into some more questions.
Okay. Retired Marine bandsman, and I grew up in the city of Boston, and I was in the band from 1969 to 1987. And let's see who I am. That's it. I'm just a retiree couch potato right now, playing gigs on the side, not doing too much of anything. The years went by quickly, and quick overview of my band service would just be 1969 to 1987.
Okay, thanks. What about your early musical influences? And did you begin on euphonium?
Okay, my early influence was my uncle, Constantine Metropolis, who was a reed virtuoso at Norwich University. And he was a tank commander out there, and I was just a young man. And he'd pick me up in Boston and drive me up to Norwich University to live in the band barracks. And I was influenced by all these Army bandsmen that run out every day and play all these marches for everybody. And that really stirred me up to initially got me interested in the military band. That was my early influence. After that, I played violin, and that didn't last too long. The violin was my first instrument, and I broke it riding my bicycle on the way to school one day. I ran over it, and the only instrument they had left in the elementary school was this little instrument in the back room, looked like a flower pot. She said, "That's a baritone. You want to take that up?" I said, "Okay." And that's how I started on euphonium. It was actually baritone then. I didn't know any better. I didn't have a teacher for a while. I was playing the violin studies on it in the wrong clef and everything else, but I caught up with things later on. That was my early influence when playing euphonium. And my euphonium teacher, I was very fortunate. His name was Aaron Harris, and he was Simone Mantia's sidekick in the Sousa band. He lived right up the street from me in Boston. That was my earliest, most influential teacher.
Great. Okay, well, I've just got a few follow-up questions about that, Luke. First of all, you talked about that you started on the baritone. Do you remember what brand, what it was, how many valves? Just curious for those people
Yeah,
who
it was a very
normally start on baritone.
Yeah, very small. I still remember what it was. It was a very small, upright, three-valve baritone made by Boucher.
Okay.
I remember the name on it, Boucher.
Nice.
Beuefer. And bought it for $25 after I used it.
What a price.
Yeah. Of course, as the years went by, I graduated to a Constellation. It's a long story after that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you spoke about Aaron Harris, who played in the Sousa band alongside Mantia. What are your recollections of studying with him?
Strict. I would go to a lesson. I'd drive all the way to his house, about 5 or 6 miles with streetcars from Boston out to Lynn, Massachusetts. And if I wasn't ready, he said, "Luke, go home. I don't like the way you're playing today." Why? Because I was playing football that week or something. He said, on the way out the door, he'd call me back. He said, "Luke, $5." They had insult upon injury. I'd give him the $5 and I'd leave going. I was furious on the way home. So I said, next time I come up here, I'm really going to give it to him.
Yeah. And did you?
Very, very strict German teacher.
Wow. So did you show up the next time way more prepared?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I really gave it to him. That's how I fought back, you know.
And did he have any stories about Mantia since he was right there with him that you remember?
He had, I never met Mantilla. I never said much about him. He was a totally different style player. Harris has an etude book that is prerequisite for trumpet players to graduate from Curtis. He wrote it for trumpet and baritone, but it just says trumpet. That's where he made his money. He didn't have much to say about Mantilla at all, not really. So, uh,
Interesting. I remember when I studied with Art Lehman, he would tell me stories about him studying with Mantia, and he said that he would go study with him week after week, or however many times he would take lessons, however often, and Mantia would perform something for Art, and then Art would say, "Well, how do you do it?" And Mantia would say, "I don't know, just play it like me." So I thought that was really interesting. Here you've got this a person who ended up being a world-renowned euphoniumist in the euphonium history, and he couldn't even tell a student how to do what he was doing. So I thought that was kind of funny. That's why I was wondering if Aaron Harris was kind of the same kind of guy, or actually he had tips for you and could show you and tell you how to do things on the euphonium.
Well, the only thing he criticized and told me, I was playing lots of notes back then. He said, "Look, I have one criticism. I don't like your tone."
Wow.
That's all he said. The notes were fine. I don't like your tone. So the whole emphasis was on the tone. Didn't tell me how he did it, like most teachers, Watrous and even on the trombone and some of these virtuoso players can't tell you how they do it. They just do it so naturally sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But he'd pick up the horn and say, "It's just how you make a tone. Make me play long tones, hold a note for a minute at a time." He used to say, "If you can hold this note for 1 minute, I'll let you shake my hand." I said, "Okay, well, hold on." Finally, I held a note for 1 minute, then I shook his hand. Later on, when I was teaching, I tried the same technique on some of the younger students today. I said, "If you can hold this note for 1 minute, I'll let you shake my hand." Kids looking at me, big deal. It's not the same generation.
Sure, sure. Well,
Yeah.
you kind of mentioned offhand that your early teachers may have kind of drew you to military music. Was it a certain band that you had heard, or did you hear recordings, or how did you get turned on to the whole military band career?
Oh, the first band that impressed me was the Norwich University marching band of all things. I stayed at the barracks with my uncle. But after that, as I was in high school, doing the all-state thing and all that, I was always in an all-state first year as a high school student. Somebody said, "You want to go downtown in Donnelly Memorial Theater? The Marine Band is playing down there." I said, "Really? Okay." My band director would take me down there, and he played these dramatic, phenomenal entrances, fanfares, like Clifton Williams style fanfares at full blast, and the people in the audience just jumped off their seats. I had never heard anything so awesome in my life, other than the Chopin Band. And I don't think anybody ever will, because the Chopin Band was paranormal, what they had in players in there. Unbelievable. They weren't people with that had much education that were in the early Chopin Band. They were bandsmen, from Pennsylvania and from Illinois, and they really played well. But that was my initial. That did it for me when I heard the Marine Band. I said, "That's the band I want to go to."
Wow, very nice. So now let's kind of move on from high school. What about your post high school time prior to the Marine Band? What you did and
Okay, well, I was at Boston University, and growing up in Boston, I was extremely fortunate. I was playing all over the city, and some of the older men in the other bands were taking these young fellas in like me. And as I progressed, I was playing bass trombone with the Boston Pops with Arthur Fiedler, and Harry Dixon was the director when Arthur went away. After that, I played in the Walter Smith band. Walter Smith Jr., his son, had a band at the Prudential Center, and I played in that. And I played the MIT Wind Ensemble, Boston University Band, and they finally did an awful lot of playing in Boston as a kid. I finally graduated in 1968, and then I just joined the Marine Band in 1969.
So were there any euphonium players that influenced you from the Marine Band before you came into the band?
Yeah, it was Art Lehman. I heard him play a few licks, and I thought it was a gorgeous sound. He was very precise, and I really enjoyed Art. I never studied with him. We were sort of sidekicks together for a while there, and what I did learn from him was he was a very, very precise player.
Mm-hmm. And
You
how
know,
many years did you play alongside him before he retired?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. Wasn't
Then I
sure.
was in the chopping block. It was a hard act to follow.
Sure. Big shoes to fill, I'm sure, especially having played alongside of him and me studying with him. I can't imagine day in and day out working with him. I'm sure after a while you got comfortable, but I would imagine early on it might have been just a little challenging, maybe, or uncomfortable. I don't know how to say it.
There's a funny thing. Art, Art was very physical, and I was a pretty big guy compared to Art, and he kidded around a lot. So I played something wrong next to him, and he took his fist and punched me in the right shoulder and fell off my chair.
He was a pretty solid little guy, though, from what I
Oh
remember.
yeah, he's pretty solid. I said, "I'm sorry, Art. I won't do that again."
It's just like they say about little dogs and little guys. You have to be worried about the little ones. It's not necessarily the
Yeah,
big guys that'll get you. You kind of expect that, but you don't expect that from someone smaller.
no, those little chihuahuas will rip your ankle off.
Exactly. So, okay, so we talked a little bit about art. I seem to remember that you kind of had an interesting entrance into the Marine Corps. If I remember you and I talking years ago,
Yeah, I guess you and I are very similar in that way. We ended up in the line.
how did that happen?
Well, I went to audition. Oh, that was very ignorant on my part. I was so excited about getting in the band, and Chopin was in the office, and I came and auditioned for Chopin and Harper. They said, "Okay, you're all set. Go home. We'll let you know. Well, we're going to come down." I didn't know it wasn't any boot camp. I didn't know there was any boot camp.
Uh-huh.
So went back to Boston, South Station, and the recruiter said to me, "Why don't you go into the 110-day reserve plan? Go to Paris Island now, and you'll be all set for when the opening is. Just go right into the band." I said, "Okay." So I hopped on a bus and ended up in Paris Island for 14 weeks. And the graduation day they call out who's who, and it came out with the commandant sees fit that Luke Spiros has been much more beneficial to the Marine Corps during these times of the Vietnam War as a cryptologist, high speed code operator, who was good at rhythm,
Wow.
rather than quote a horn blower. They called me a horn blower. They don't need horn blowers in Vietnam. That's what they told me at boot camp. So I was stuck there for 4 years.
Then
Vietnam,
got to the Marine Band.
Vietnam, Hawaii, yeah, before the Marine Band, yeah.
Wow. That's kind of not quite parallel what I experienced. I too wanted to be in the Marine Band. That was my dream. And I went to the Marine recruiter and he said, "Oh, if you want to be in the President's own United States Marine Band, you've got to go to boot camp and go through the regular Marine Corps." So I was
Yeah. Oh, you got
gullible enough
ripped
to
up
believe
too.
that.
Wow, you got it too, huh? Wow.
Yep.
Those recruiters didn't know what they were talking about.
They really
It's a
did, because the band is so different than the rest of the Marine Corps. They just don't know what to do with it. In fact, I have colleagues I went to the university with, husband and wife, their daughter just auditioned for the Marine Band not too long ago. And she's dealing with the recruiters even in the 21st century that they're like, we don't know what to do about this president's own thing. And so she's
yeah.
trying to navigate through that as it is. Okay, so now that we've kind of established the Marine Band, what do you remember about your audition? Do you remember any details, anything that went well, anything that you went, hmm?
My audition, I felt very confident. I was playing all these different solos as a kid, and I had gone completely through the Auburn's book, and I played all beautiful Colorado, all these different solos. What I said, for the first thing they asked you for on the audition is be prepared to play a prepared solo. So, like an idiot, I said, "What would you like to hear?" And I forgot what he said. King Carnival, King Carnival.
Mm.
See, well, let's hear you play King Carnival. So I played King Carnival. Then I went through the sight reading. I felt nervous as heck, very intimidated. And they were taking all the boom, 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 the checkers march stuff and everything else. And I played my solo, and that impressed them most, that I knew what King Carnival was, and I played it without making a mistake. I was very confident in my audition. You know, I don't know if you're like I am. No matter what you do, I always think I could have done it better. You know.
Okay, well, and I just want to kind of plug this. I remember when you and I first met, and I had told you, I don't even remember where it was, but I remember we met. It might have been maybe the first time I auditioned for the Marine Band, but you and I were talking, and you asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be in your band. I want to be in the Marine Band. And you told me, you said, just keep working, keep practicing, and it'll work out. And it did. And then I
Yeah.
got the bonus of being able to sit beside you after I got to the band before you retired, and kind of rub shoulders with you and learn as quickly and as much as I could from you, just like you learned from Art. So I will forever be indebted to you for those words of encouragement that you gave me.
I am only sorry that I didn't last a little longer with you. I was about ready to retire when you came in. So
Me too. I would have loved to have had more time.
I think I gave your left ear a break. I played pretty
Exactly.
loud back then.
Okay, so before we retire you from the Marine Band, I want to have you talk a bit about life in the Marine Band. What was a day-to-day schedule for you when you're in the Marine Band? Because as we know, generations, decades of our band in particular, rehearsal schedules and different things change. So what was a day in the life of the Marine Band for Luke Spiros?
Okay, my daily routine, I would get to the barracks in the morning at 6 o'clock. There wouldn't be a soul in the band hall. And I would warm up and practice from 6 to about 9 when rehearsal started. And I'd already been playing like 3 hours, strong practice. Then the average day we would rehearse with Colonel Schoepel. We didn't mess around. You rehearsed and you quit. You didn't over rehearse the band. You did it one time. If you didn't do it, you were in trouble. So he would rehearse Monday and Tuesday for a Wednesday night concert. You wouldn't see him again until the following Sunday for the Sunday concert. Not today. It's all changed. They rehearse. Schoepel was so impressive that when he did something, he knew what he was doing and he knew what he wanted. And he made it known that it better sound that way 4 nights from now or else, you know. So I always kept prepared, always went in there in the morning and practiced. Had more practicing and work done on my solos in the morning at the band hall between 6 and 9 before the rehearsal. That way I didn't bother anybody at home and really get my chops up for the following day because the days were long. After you could have that rehearsal till 12, you might have a White House lawn ceremony, a couple of funerals, and then following that evening, a band concert. The days were long. You know, they were long then.
Right. And you talked so highly, speak so highly of Colonel Schoepel. What made him, from a perspective of myself and others who didn't enjoy working under him in the Marine Band, what was he like? Besides being, it sounds like he was very detail oriented. What else?
Well, he wasn't a very nice guy. I don't know if you heard stories about that. And at that time, the Marine Band was on its own. We were not existing to go on the road at the cost of taxpayers. So he had control of the band. Later on, other directors gave the band away to Marine Corps support that went down the tube. When he was in charge of the band, he'd actually turn around and ask the commandant to leave the band hall so he could rehearse. That's how much power he had.
Yeah, that says a lot for a colonel to tell a four-star general, much less the commandant, that
Yeah.
go ahead and get out. We're working right now, sir.
He's done that, and that's the kind of power he had, and he was very strict. He had a black aura around. He used to go to Gene Dixon. Gene Dixon would send him home because she didn't like the black aura around his head. A lot of stories about Schoepel. He scared people. Yeah.
So what if you had one story to share about him that our audience could maybe enjoy or laugh about or not shocked about, what story would that be?
Well, a short story. I don't know if you've heard it before. I used to, and all I went on like 21 tours, and I got sick and tired of sitting on the bus, so I decided to drive the equipment truck with a fella in the van by the name of Joe Rasmussen, just to get away from the regular routine, get on a bus, a truck, and have my own travel. So one day, Joe and I went to Howard Johnson's after we loaded the equipment truck with the band after a concert in Trenton, and we went out to get the truck, and somebody had stolen it.
Oh, no.
Right in the middle of the Marine Band tour. So I said, Joe, did you hide the truck? No. Joe said, did I hide it? No. Did you hide the truck? No. So we called the FBI and the troops, everybody was out in Trenton, the radio stations. And I said, who's going to tell Chopper? I said, well, I'll knock on the door. It's 12:30 at night. Good heavens, here it goes. I knock, knock, knock. The colonel, bah! He opened the door, looks at me. Someone has stolen our tour truck. He looked at me and said, find it, and slammed the door in my face. Well, the next morning we finally found it, and the guys in the band were overjoyed because they got to miss the afternoon concert in Danbury because they didn't have the equipment truck yet. Meanwhile, Joe and I finally did get the truck found. We ended up in Danbury, Connecticut that evening, very tired. And we played this big lick, and I hadn't slept in 24, maybe 36 hours. I don't know what it was. And I cracked this note in Don Juan, and he took me in the back room after that, ran me over the coals for cracking a note in Don Juan after doing all that driving and no sleep and everything else. So that's how sympathetic Chopper was.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah,
So all the equipment was found in the truck? So you just didn't find an empty truck?
No, they found the truck. What happened? They were looking all over the state for it, but it was only a block away because whoever stole the truck jacked the door open and saw all these federal instruments and uniforms. And they said, oh, this is federal. And they dropped it. They just took off. They just left it there. They didn't take a thing.
Wow.
Meanwhile, during that entire time, the Marine barracks was gathering up instruments and uniforms to send out to keep us going. And that came to a sudden halt after we found it. That's the best story I have to show for me.
That's pretty funny. I mean, I heard other stories that we won't share on this podcast that you were definitely a part of that I still giggle about, but we won't take the time to talk about those. So the tour concerts, how long were the tours? And then how long was like an average concert or concerts?
Okay, we went out without cost to the taxpayer. So they were charging $3,000 a concert, 14-week tours without one day off, and 2 and 3 concerts a day.
And how long were the concerts?
About an hour to an hour and a half.
Wow.
They had iron chops back then.
Sure. Yeah. I remember, the one tour I went on, even though it was only 8 weeks when I was still in the band. And man, oh man, when we got done at week 8, we should have just taken the band and recorded because the band played so well. I remember doing the whole suite in E flat and thinking, my goodness, it would never have been better. So you said you did 21 tours. Sometimes some days like what we had when I was on tour with the band, you had multiple concerts in a day. You might have maybe on a Sunday, you might have a matinee and then have a later concert.
Those double matinees were not pleasant.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure, because after one concert, your chops would be tired enough. Yeah. Now, was it true that I had heard that you would get some kind of bonus as a principal on tours with Chopper, or was that just a wives' tale?
Yeah, no, it was the people in the band made money. The booking agent was totally separate from the taxpayer in the Marine Corps. Chopin made thousands of dollars. I get paid, I still remember, $500 or $600 every tour for playing principal. Yeah, the money was dispersed pretty well. The whole thing changed. Then Jack Anderson got in a fight with Colonel Harper. Colonel Harper was double dipping, and that destroyed the whole thing. They had the government take it over. They stopped the tour agents. They stopped the pay, and we started going out to the cost of the taxpayer after that because of Jack Anderson's hate for Colonel Harper.
Yeah.
And he was a two-bit journalist in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I remember when
A
we
lot
were
of
for, we would, have to go down to dispersing and get our cash for tours. And like you say, the money came from the Marine Corps, came from the government. And I remember so vividly that the more senior you were, the further up front of the bus you were allowed to sit. So I remember me being the junior guy and being back there by the restroom on our West Coast tour with those 8 hour a day bus rides right next to the toilet. Fun time. Still speaking about the tour, I'd like you to address chop health when you're on a tour for that long, playing hard. Were there tricks? Were there things you did to try to, keep your chops responsive, or did you just hammer them?
Well, it's a funny thing. I remember one tour I played the Mussorgsky Pictures of an Exhibition, the Bidlow every night. It was beautiful when I started. Never missed a note. In fact, I never missed one single note that entire tour. But as the last week or last couple of weeks were going, my sound had started to deteriorate, and I couldn't understand that. It was actually deteriorating. I was not getting a good sound. I think I just made it. I think the lips have finally said, "This is it." So after we got back home, I rested a little while. The sound is all back again, but the body can take so much. Instead of getting better and better and better, it was strong, but it was rough. Hard to explain. It
Yeah.
was stiff and leaky.
Yep. I can definitely identify with the stiff, just doing the 8 week tour. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Great. Well, what about recording sessions that the band did? How were they run? How did they go?
Well, like the Sousa recordings, for instance, would walk in there and we'll all sit down and nobody, we're waiting for to get on the stand. And when he got on the stand, we're all ready to go. He'll say this, and we'll run through it one time, maybe twice, and that was it. He didn't rehearse much with Chopin, believe it or not. He'd read through these things. We did the Sousa albums, about 24 of them in no time at all. Of course, we didn't have a good recording engineer at the time, so maybe I think they redid them again. Recording sessions were very strict, very professional.
You don't want to waste time. Besides working on solos, were there any other techniques or elements that you included regularly on in your practice sessions?
Well, calisthenics, a lot of calisthenics, tonguing, articulation, triple tonguing, flexibility, making sure everything was working just right. Get your triple tongue up to a certain speed, and double tonguing clean, and speed up the single tongue, high range. Always have to, always able to hit a double high B flat without any problem. Still do it today. I don't know why, but still there.
Well, muscle
But
memory, you've done it enough over the years. Your body's like,
yeah,
yeah, I can do this.
it kept it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
80 years
you.
old.
Yeah, 80 years old. That's impressive. So continuing with the idea of preparing solos, were there any approaches that you took when you were preparing, like if you got a new solo and you were just starting to work on it, how you approached it?
Yes, there is. I take a section at a time. Every section has a different motif, sort of. And
Sure.
I practice that over and over, then get on the second section or the third section. Then I play the whole thing all over again. And when I had a solo, I didn't play it so I could play it right. I kept playing it so I could not play it wrong. And that's the philosophy I had. Play it so you don't play it right. Play it so you cannot, but when you play it, you cannot play it wrong. Then you got
Right.
to solo down.
Yeah, and I feel that a lot of younger students that I've worked with over the years, they have been just content with playing it till they got it right maybe one time, instead of, like you said, playing it until you can't get it wrong, because there's that comfort factor in performance that if we're comfortable with a piece, we have less chances of things maybe going a little sideways, unless maybe the band that's accompanying us does something goofy, or maybe the conductor does something goofy. As we're kind of running out of time, I want to have just a couple other questions, and then we're going to close down this episode. The first question would be, what would be your greatest memory or performance with the Marine Band in your career?
Oh, gee. I played so many solos with the band, and I was always pleased with myself and everything else. It's hard to explain. I don't know if I can mention this, but if anybody is interested, you can get on Google and Google Lucas Spiros. You'll see a whole list of all the stuff I've done with the Marine Band.
I'm going to do some show notes once I get all this produced and everything. And so we'll try to put links in there for people that they can just go to the show notes and click on it on their phone or whatever they're listening to, and then find those links.
I think believe it or not, one of the greatest solos I ever played was most satisfactory was not with the Marine Band, but with the Air Force Band to the West. I was out there doing clinics for the TUBA, and I was in Denton, Texas, and I played Air Marie by Pryor.
Yes.
I've had it posted on Facebook, but you can find that on a Google, Air Marie, Lucas Spiros, and that came up phenomenally. Just beautiful.
It was a wonderful recording. In fact, I played that very recording for my university studio class this past spring, and they were just blown away by it. They were just like their jaws were dropping to the floor. So, I always try to take recordings such as yours to show and demonstrate to my students not only what has been done in the past, but what is possible even in the present. Thank you for such a wonderful recording.
Yeah, you heard that. You heard that one with the Air Force Band to the West?
Yes.
That was an excellent. I couldn't get anybody in the Marine Band to conduct it that well.
And then
after Chopra left, I couldn't get anybody.
Yeah. Chopra left, yeah. And then finally, what would you say are some actionable tips that you would offer to aspiring young euphonium students?
Tips for euphonium students. Oh, there's so many. I would concentrate on the equipment you use.
Okay.
Don't start with the wrong equipment to get the right mouthpiece, the right horn that fits you. I think a lot of people are under the estimation that you've got to play this mouthpiece and this horn to be any good. Not the truth. You sound phenomenal on your setup. Everybody's different. I would just say to be very careful in choosing the equipment. I think that's very important. And getting advice from different teachers on what they sound like on it.
Very good. Well, Luke, I really appreciate our time together. According to my timer, we have about 2 minutes and 10 seconds until it cuts us off. So I think we're at a good point to end our podcast. Again, I just want to thank you for being such a wonderful person, an incredible euphonium player, a euphonium player that I believe everyone who plays euphonium now needs to know about. And this is part of the reason why I wanted to do the Euphomisms podcast, was to showcase euphonium players from today, from yesterday, so that players can gain insight from people like you and others. So I want to thank you once again, Luke, for joining us. And I look forward to all the responses that we'll get in the future.